birthplace of jazz, and its influence can be heard across all genres of American music, from funk to hip hop and rock and roll. When Hurricane Katrina devastated that city in 2005, local musicians rose up to support their community, and some would say very much helped to save that city. Mark Mullins, he is a New Orleans native and founding member of the band Bonarama, whose latest album, Shake It Baby, was released this spring. And Keith Spira is an entertainment journalist for the New Orleans Times-Picayune and author of Groove Interrupted, Lost Renewal, and the Music of New Orleans. They both join me here via Skype. So glad to be able to talk to you guys today. It's 8 years, this month marks 8 years since that tragic event with Hurricane Katrina. I want to turn to you, Mark, first. You play the trombone. What were those first days like, the first gigs that you had after the hurricane?
Yeah, well, we were on tour at that time. We had left for a weekend tour in Little Rock, Arkansas, and when we left, it didn't even look like the storm was coming towards New Orleans at that point. They still had forecast Florida. But as we got into the weekend, they kept shifting the path, and we're out on the road at this point. So yeah, we stayed in Little Rock as the storm approached. Our families evacuated all to different places, and family came up to Little Rock. And those days after were just unbelievable because everybody was glued to the television. Nobody could really get home if they had left. And we didn't know for a while if our houses were still there or whose houses were lost or anything like that. It was a very, 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 very strange, difficult time for everybody in a lot of different ways.
And Keith, why was it so important for musicians to get back to New Orleans in the aftermath of Katrina?
Well, musicians to a degree were citizens just like everybody else. They were facing the same challenges that everybody else had. Where are you going to go send your kids to school? Where am I going to live? Where am I going to eat? But the musicians sort of helped, I would say, provide the soundtrack to the recovery. They became something for folks to rally around. They became something to give people a break when you'd spent all day, gutting out your house. The miserable task that was. You could go out at night and commune with your fellow New Orleanians and rally around the flagpole of New Orleans music and culture. And that was a great relief to a lot of people, especially in those first months after the storm.
Mark, you were shaking your head there. Not only that, the musicians were ambassadors outside of the city of New Orleans as well.
Right, exactly. For a short time, nothing was open for the first few weeks after the storm in New Orleans. Even if we could get back, what were we going to do? How are we going to work? And so we put our heads together. My booking agent happened to be in Little Rock when we were evacuated. I went down with him, and my job was to get with him and try to get work for our band since we couldn't go home. There was, some of the guys had nothing to go home to. So we tried to stay out on the road, and that's exactly what we felt. We felt like ambassadors. We didn't expect to be in this position, but we suddenly felt like we were speaking for the main story that everybody in the country and the world was seeing on their news every night, and we could speak for New Orleans, and we're on a stage, not just through our music. And I met a lot of people that would come to our shows in these days after the storm, the weeks after the storm, and people I'd never seen at our shows before, and I knew they didn't really even know who we were. But they found out we're from New Orleans, and they were like, we just wanted to come. We didn't know what we could do. We want to help New Orleans, but we didn't know what we could do. We just wanted to come be with you guys. And stuff like that just blew us away. We had some real memorable shows, meeting a lot of great people around the country.
Yeah, Keith, you wanted to jump in here?
Yes, I remember going to see Kermit Ruffins, the trumpet player and singer from New Orleans, in Houston just a couple of weeks after the storm. And, he was like a magnet for this group of displaced New Orleanians, as well as what Mark was saying, as well as Houstonians and folks that just kind of wanted to lend a hand and throw an arm around a shoulder. But that gig was so much fun because you had, it was so poignant, but it was great to lose yourself in the music and celebrate with your fellow New Orleanians because you didn't know what exactly was going on back home. But for that moment, everything was cool and you were having a good time. And I remember New Orleanians famously don't wear Mardi Gras beads when it's not Mardi Gras. That's just like tacky tourist.
Yeah.
At that show, everybody was wearing Mardi Gras beads. It was sort of a badge of honor to proclaim.
You're like repping for New Orleans. Mark, a big moment comes in with the Jazz Festival in 2006. I think you guys got something like 300,000 people there, 300 musicians. You were one of them, as well as Bruce Springsteen. The Dave Matthews Band was there, probably Juvenile too. Tell me about that event and being a part of it and what you felt.
Well, first, it was great to have all those bands open for us. I mean, that was unbelievable.
Yeah, you were the headliner.
No, to be back in New Orleans for Jazz Fest, for French Quarter Fest, these festivals, with the lack of infrastructure in the city and the amount of people that were displaced, it was a tall order, a huge order to pull off any festival like what they pulled off. Yeah. The first one that I remember was Voodoo Fest. And this Voodoo Fest is coming up right now at the end of October. And they pulled their festival off. They were able to do it. Nothing was open like the first few weeks after the storm. Like, how are you going to launch a big festival, a music festival? And it was the most therapeutic thing to be able to come home and drive down there to Audubon Park, where it was at the time, and see all these musicians that you hadn't seen because they were all displaced on the road, spreading the word about New Orleans and playing gigs like we were. Yeah. And to see them in our hometown finally. It was an amazing thing, and those festivals helped bring other outside musicians to New Orleans, and they had their spotlight shining on the cause as well. It was amazing.
Yeah, Keith, you're shaking your head.
That first Voodoo, Mark's exactly right. That first Voodoo Fest was staged exactly 2 months after the storm, which is incredible when you think about it, because I mean the city was at that point was basically depopulated. But they put together this festival. 9 Inch Nails was one of the headliners. Cowboy Mouth from here, as Mark said, this mix of locals with a couple of national acts that stuck around from the original lineup. The festival was greatly downsized, and a lot of musicians from outside of New Orleans didn't necessarily want to come here and play because they didn't know what the deal was. There weren't any nice hotels or restaurants or anything. But still to this day, I think people have a soft spot for Trent Reznor and 9 Inch Nails because those guys said, no, we're going to come down and we're going to play, and it was amazing. It was great. I mean, everything was so raw at that point. So I had that little bit of normalcy. And then, fast forwarding to the following spring in 2006 for that Jazz Fest.
Yeah, this is 8 months after the storm.
I mean, it was still very raw and still, emotions were still right on edge. But specifically that gig, as Mark said, one of his opening bands, Bruce Springsteen, played the Secret Sessions group. And, to this day, I mean, I'll say that was one of the top 5 musical experiences of my entire life. And I've seen a lot of gigs, writing about it for 25 years now. Yeah. It was the perfect meeting of music and moment. And I remember I was standing in a row with several other writers, people who see a lot of shows. Yeah. Every one of us was weeping during that show. It was so intense and so emotional. And it was a classic Springsteen of, it's really hard, but we're in this together and we're going to get through it. And it was just, I walked out of that fest just exhilarated. I mean, I felt emotion purged and exhilarated to carry on. I think a lot of other people did too.
Mark, in what way do you feel like, or is there a way that Katrina has affected your approach to your music?
I think we might value it better. We might value the camaraderie and the family better. Because we knew we almost lost it. We thought, but. Right. I remember those days after the storm, all the musicians were calling each other in different parts of the country, just trying to figure out: are you going to move back? You're going to stay in New Orleans, or are you going to move away? Because it's a family down here. It's a tight knit community. I mean, like there's a lot of musicians in this city, especially for the city of this size. It's what we're known for. So, like to have this family being threatened to be broken up. It was terrifying, all of us. So I think if it's changed anything, it's made us, appreciate each other more, if anything. And there was also something in the music in those days after that did change. It was extra passionate, extra meaningful, and I think we still remember that today. That's a part of our fiber now.
Yeah, Keith, any sense that there's a bit of a cultural renaissance, cultural rebirth in terms of literature, music, art? What's your sense of that down in Louisiana?
Well, as Mark said, coming out of the storm, there was definitely a renewed appreciation for New Orleans music and culture amongst New Orleanians for sure. I mean, people, you know, you were on the verge of losing it all, it seemed like, and so suddenly, yeah, you want to go out and hear it, and you want to see it, and you kind of, people I think here started appreciating a lot more what we had, but then with these musicians out on the road serving as ambassadors, the benefit concerts, all these sort of things, it certainly, I think, elevated the profile of New Orleans music nationally, and you know, as a result of that, you know, some musicians have definitely had incredibly fruitful years since then, and you've gotten more people coming down here wanting to be a part of it and wanting to contribute to the scene. So maybe there's a little more of an influx of folks from elsewhere coming down here to be musicians in New Orleans, and so they're bringing with them their own influences and styles. But you know, New Orleans music in all of its many permutations is still its own thing.
One of the things that we've seen an influx of, Mark, is corporate money and corporate presence, and maybe the most visible sign of that is the old Superdome now is called, I believe, the Mercedes-Benz Superdome. I guess that has a certain ring to it. How has that sort of influx changed the city at all? Any concerns about that influx of corporate ownership and money?
Well, you know, I think all that stuff helps bring a better spotlight towards New Orleans. I mean, Shell has come in and they're sponsoring the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival. Okay. And it really is a lot of things going on. There's a huge sense of entrepreneurship going on in New Orleans. A lot of outside people are moving in to start new business, new IT jobs, things that we.
You guys are making me want to move to New Orleans. I got to tell you that.
I tell you what, and the housing market's doing very, very well. It's almost, but you know, there's pros and cons. I mean, it's like, well, if the housing market's doing so well, does that price New Orleanians out of being able to live in neighborhoods they used to live in that they can't afford now? But hey, it's a city that before the storm, the city was so slow to change. That's just that's how we were. That's how we like. And in one day, it was forever changed. But we've had this huge outpouring of help and support from everybody around the country and around the world, and that's made a big, big difference here. So that, you know, there's more sponsorship and there's a little bit of a different demographic or a different makeup of our economy than there used to be. But I think New Orleanians you have to embrace that. We survived the recession better than most other cities in America did. And
partly that, partly that I'm sure was the culture and the music. Keith, what should I be listening to other than Shake It Baby and Cash Money Records folks?
Well, they're all fine and good.
Yeah.
But yeah, talk about people that have come to prominence after the storm. Troy Andrews, trombone shorty, trumpet player from here, started playing as a kid. His national profile has just gone through the roof over the last couple of years. You know, and he's an interesting example of a guy who is New Orleans to the core, yet has all these other influences in his music. You know, he spent, when he was very young, he went on the road as a member of Lenny Kravitz's horn section. Okay. So, you know, the last couple of records he's done for Verve, you know, there's a lot of horns, there's some funky New Orleans stuff, but there's also sort of a Lenny Kravitz kind of rock thing. So Shorty, his career right now, it's an interesting example of what happens when New Orleans influences meet with other influences and what you get for that. There's a group from here called Hooray for the Riff Raff. Great singer-songwriter. They started off playing on the streets of New Orleans. They just signed to ATO Records, the record label that Dave Matthews founded. So they're going to have a record coming out next year. I think they're great. And that's going to be a band from New Orleans that has a national profile, not necessarily doing quote-unquote New Orleans music straight up, but a band that literally came up from the streets here in New Orleans, and you'll see where that gets them.
And Mark, quickly, give me one person other than yourself and Harry Connick Jr., who should I be listening to?
Oh.
What group is just, I got to listen to those cats? Is that what you guys say down there?
I like to look back. You mean today? Can it be somebody in the past?
Yeah, sure.
I mean, I would say the Meters, because they've revolutionized New Orleans music, and there's so many people that still are unaware of the Meters.
I am one of those, the Meters.
Meters too. A lot of those, you know, those the Cash Money guys and all those use those Meters samples in their.
Okay, guys, we're gonna have to leave it here, but thank you so much for telling me about New Orleans today. You guys should work for the tourist industry down there. This is fantastic. I really thank you. Take care. Thank you to my guests, Mark Mullins of Bonorama and Keith Sparrow from the Times-Picayune. A special thanks also to New Orleans photographer Brian Epstein for letting us use his pictures in this segment. And thanks to all of you for joining us. Have a great Labor Day, and we'll see you right back here on Tuesday.